week. Hope you had a blessed weekend and you are safe, you and your family. It's been a lot going on, so I'm praying that God is protecting you, keeping you healthy. Today, we're going to talk about the race at work, right? The race to work. Believe you me, nobody would rather be talking about unity and equal opportunity and everybody holding hands and getting along more than me. Check my mic. I grew up in a household where we did not discuss economic, psychological impacts of racism or even racism in general on Black folks. So I am an expert at not talking about it for the most part. So growing up, I realized the impact psychologically and emotionally on not discussing some of these topics in the Black community. So I feel there's a lot of value in being validated, a lot of value in not feeling like you're alone or you're crazy, right? Not to make everything about Nick Fuentes, but he made it clear in front of millions of people. We had these discussions at the dinner table. You know, these Black folks, those Black folks, different things like that. So these discussions are being had. So I think it's only fair for Black people to be knowledgeable of your environment. What's going on? Don't be ignorant, right? The Bible clearly says that his people is destroyed for the lack of knowledge, right? Let me close this window. As soon as I start talking, they bring out the wood chippers. So it's important for us to discuss what's going on. We live in a society where the racism discussion is going to be forever going on because there's not really a one size fits all solution to the issue. So we have to discuss the implications of this dynamic at work. A lot of times with the racism, people are not really interacting with each other unless they grew up in proximity to each other and they have that understanding of that relationship. Maybe they share faith, right, or some sort of value system where they're aligned and they all get along, right? But then you do have a population of people who would rather not interact with different cultures, diverse groups, and things of that nature. And the only time you really see them interact with each other is in the workplace, is on the highway to work, back and forth, or at school, okay? So it's important for Black people to be knowledgeable of some of the dynamics that occur in these workplaces. The racism just spills over into the workplace. I've experienced it. I've seen it, right? Sometimes Black folks think they're going crazy, like, man, I'm working my ass off. But the person that's doing the less work gets the promotion. Randy, I come to work just to focus on the job and get things done. It's already enough worrying about that. And I don't get promoted because they say I'm not social enough. Everybody's social. There's a lot of dynamics that go on, and some Black people don't feel like people understand, or it's just really taboo to discuss. So we're going to talk about it, right? Why not? So I have some information here. Networking is the real currency of modern career sectors. And like all currency, it is controlled by those who already hold power. Access to opportunity is less about resumes and more about proximity. Who you're comfortable around, who you trust, who feels familiar. In corporate America, that familiarity is overwhelmingly shaped by white cultural norms, values, and social codes. Golf outings, right? Casual banter, the happy hours at work, right? After hour drinks, indirect communication styles, and unspoken expectations of likability become informal gateways to advancement. For African Americans, entry into elite professional spaces often requires not just competence, but fluency in a cultural language that was never designed with them in mind. Without that fluency, access narrows, not because of lack of skill, but because of difference, and difference is quietly interpreted as risk. You absolutely need to be social, Black folks. If you're in a job or a workspace that's predominantly white, you one of the only Black people walking up in there. You go in there quiet to yourself. You're thinking you're just going to do your job and you're not going to bother nobody. Right? You're just be invisible. You're just going to work and don't nobody bother me. It's not gonna work. Right? It's not gonna work. The expectation is for you to be social right? You have to talk, you have to communicate, you have to, and there's nothing wrong with communication and being social. I'm not saying you got to be a hermit, but you might have to socialize more than what you're comfortable with, all right? White folks love to talk at work. I don't know what it is. I think they just, that's their way of socializing, it's their way of networking. That's a cultural value for them. I know with some black people, they don't got to talk to nobody. Right? They can go into work, do their job, they're out of there. Hello, how you doing? I'm fine. Oh, you're good? The kids are good? Awesome. Right? Because it's enough pressure to keep the damn job. Right? You already feel like you're under a microscope just with everything going on outside of work. Right? And you come to work, so you're like, damn, okay, I gotta make sure I do my job right. I gotta make sure I do everything. Sometimes we have like a little bit of invisible perfectionism in the black community. So it's enough just keeping the damn job. All right. Did you add the social dynamic and all these cultural factors and stuff like that? It's a lot. All right. So there are cultural value differences between different race groups, right? Just off the product of the system that we're living in. So this stuff is important to talk about, right? You black people are not crazy. I've experienced it. I'm not super extroverted, right? I like to kind of, just go to work. I like to focus and provide quality work. If I'm talking, if I'm gossiping, I'll be in there talking and gossiping all damn day. All right. I can talk and gossip with the best of them. All right. So sometimes I have to just intentionally block all that out, right? Doing ninja work, right? I just let me focus here, especially when you're a therapist, all right? You're in these tight spaces, there's not a whole lot of black therapists, right? So everybody's curious, they're interested about people. Hey, what do you think about Black Lives Matter? What do you think about? I don't want to have an opinion about that at work, right? I'm scared if I tell you guys something, the shit's going to spread around. I might end up losing my damn job, all right? And I think white people don't really have a filter of what's appropriate questions to ask and what's not appropriate because they don't really have to deal with those consequences, right? They ain't dealing with a lot of discrimination and prejudice to the degree where they can lose their damn jobs, right? So it's like they don't really have that awareness. So they'll ask you questions and they don't give a damn, all right? So these networking, dynamics and things like that and different cultural differences are very highlighted, in the workspace. So it says, as a result, many black professionals learn that visibility comes at a cost. Silence. To gain access to powerful networks, they often suppress cultural expression, soften their perspectives, and filter their values to avoid being seen as disruptive, political, or too much. This forced adaptation is not assimilation by choice, it's survival by calculation. Over time, the psychological toll accumulates as authenticity is traded for access and belonging. And this is conditioned on compliance. The tragedy is not just individual burnout, but collective loss. Organizations miss out on innovation, truth telling, and diverse leadership because the price of entry into opportunity requires African Americans to leave essential parts of themselves at the door, right? You don't want to come off too ghetto. You don't want to come off, right? Black people are very sensitive to black folks. They are, right? They don't want to admit it, but they are. They're very sensitive to, oh, he's too strong. Oh my God, his opinion's too strong. Right? You say one little thing about politics today, and that shit will spread like wildfire, especially if you're the only African American in that job. That's just the reality that we live in, right? So when a society has no agreed upon solution for racial tension, the workplace becomes its pressure chamber. Corporations inherit the conflict without inheriting the tools to resolve it. Political polarization, economic inequality, and racial trauma don't pause at your office or work door. They get compressed into performance reviews, diversity statements, and compliance trainings that attempt to regulate behavior without addressing power dynamics. In this vacuum, companies substitute policy for healing and optics for accountability. The result is a workplace where racial tension is managed, not resolved, contained just enough to avoid lawsuits, but never enough to dismantle the hierarchy that benefits from the imbalance, right? You got to expect if you walk into a company, the CEO, the managers, the supervisors, they're all white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, right? And maybe they grew up in majorities of people that look like majority neighborhoods that people that look like them. You got to expect their expectations for, advancement and, advancing subordinates and people under them are going to kind of carry the flavor of that value system, right? Just things black people don't go in there surprised, right? Don't go in there like, oh my God, I worked so damn hard, man, and I still did get, oh motherfucker, you're only one of 100 people in there that was black, right? I'm not saying you don't deserve it. Of course I would love for you to shine and rise to the top. Not all companies, right? This isn't a distorted conversation. It's not all companies, right? You got some that can connect to the black experience, that can't connect to the diversity topic or conversation, where they can, maybe they have a little bit of diversity training, diversity exposure, they have diversity competence, okay? And they do see your skills, they do see your talent. And then there's the companies that don't, right? Black folks have to be flexible, right? Don't walk away from the job as if it's a good opportunity, but if it's an opportunity that's costing you, alignment with your value system, and it's costing you your mental health, sometimes you got to leave certain jobs, right? Sometimes you got to leave, look for other opportunities, or stay there until other opportunities present themselves, right? Without a societal framework for reconciliation, corporate environments default to control. HR departments become referees in moral disputes they were never designed to adjudicate, while managers are asked to enforce neutrality in systems that were never neutral to begin with. Black employees are expected to absorb the emotional cost of this unresolved tension, to be calm, collaborative, and compliant, while the structural advantages that created the imbalance remain untouched. In this way, the workplace mirrors society itself. Conflict suppress rather than transform. I had a job as a therapist. Being a black therapist is so complicated in white America, especially when it's dominated by white women. It's a mess. And I was working at something, I don't know what company it was, Optum or something like that. I was shadowing. It was really EAP work, but we were working in the Optum offices. So they would let us, use their spaces to kind of do our EAP work and different things like that. And in order for you to get inside the offices, you got to use like this little key card, right, to get into the offices. And I don't know what I did with my key card. I think I lost my damn key card. And I'm standing there at the door to get into the office to, meet up with the rest of the therapists and things like that to do the EAP work. This white lady walked up to me. First she was looking at me like, what the hell is you doing here? Right? And she literally said that. She's like, what are you doing here? And I'm just like, in my mind, I'm like, bitch. But I ain't gonna say that. But for Detroit guys, I got that little ghetto part of me. I'm just like, what the fuck? I didn't respond like that. I'm just like, well, obviously I'm locked out, out of the door. I can't get in. She was like, what are you doing, man? I reported her ass faster than Wi-Fi. What are you doing here? I'm clearly dressed up. I'm clearly got all the garb on. Why the hell will I be hanging out in fucking Sorrento Valley, guys? Ain't no black folks here. Fucking, I'm not trick or treating. Trust me, black folks don't want to be there. They don't need to be there. All right. I felt really offended by that. What are you doing here? What are you supposed to be doing here? Man, I reported her to the HR, and how it worked is they didn't really have an HR, right? I think it was like a temp job or something like that. So nobody I could really report to, you try to do the right thing because our office spaces are so tight, right? I didn't want to keep going there every day, and the lady's like policing me like I'm not supposed to be there. So I reported her ass. Nobody to report her to. I was pissed off. I was pissed off. I think they had some type of little HR something that you could call. So I don't know who I was talking to, but I explained to them the situation. I think it was like my temp HR or something like that because it was a temp position, letting them know what happened, and it turned out, that they ended up firing me from the position because they were like, I think it was just, me losing my temper. I was just pissed off because it wasn't nobody I can report this woman to, nobody I could talk to. I'm not blaming nobody, I think I got really upset, with the supervisors of the EAP position. I felt like they're kind of like, hey, there's nothing we could really do, which I get it. You guys are just borrowing the office space, so it's not like you can turn a place upside down, right? So I get that, but I was thinking like, damn, at least have a conversation with her or something. It was like just nothing, So I got upset. And they ended up firing me for the position, but it was the best thing they could have ever did because now I'm working on my own, making more money than I ever made. So sometimes you're going to have situations, black folks, where you're going to go to HR, you're going to try to advocate for yourself. Your ass still might end up getting fired, right? But sometimes being fired is not always a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing. It definitely opened up doors for better opportunities for me. I feel like God was with me, turned the situation into a positive for me. But at the time, you don't see it like that. You're just like pissed off and you live it, right? But stuff like that happens, man. So, yeah, HR. That kind of popped up in my mind when I was thinking about that. HR departments become referees in moral disputes that were never, or they were never designed to educate, while managers are asked to enforce neutrality in systems that were never neutral to begin with. Black employees are expected to absorb the emotional cost of this unresolved tension, to be calm, collaborative, and compliant, while the structural advantages that created the imbalance remain untouched. In this way, the workplace mirrors society itself, conflict suppressed rather than transformed, inequality normalized through procedure, and racial stress redistributed downward to those with the least institutional power to resist it. All right. So, racism in the workplace rarely announces itself openly anymore. It operates through systems and norms and quiet decisions that feel neutral on the surface but produce unequal outcomes beneath. National surveys show that 41 to 45% of Black employees report experiencing racial discrimination at work compared to 7 to 10% of white employees, revealing a gap so large it cannot be explained by individual misunderstanding alone. This is not about isolated bad actors, it's about a structure that quietly advantages one group while exhausting another. Promotion data exposes the strain even more clearly. Corporate research shows that white employees are promoted to managerial roles at rates 20 to 30% higher than Black employees, even when performance ratings are comparable. For every 100 white men promoted, only 71 Black men, 58 Black women advance. This early, broken rung doesn't just limit income, it defines who becomes a decision maker, who sets culture, and who polices behavior later through HR, compliance, and leadership boards. Workplace diversity initiatives often collide with race politics rooted in the broader economy. While companies publicly champion inclusion, over 60% of Black professionals report feeling pressure to downplay cultural identity to avoid being perceived as difficult, political, or non compliant. Meanwhile, less than 15% of white employees report needing to alter their identity to fit workplace norms, revealing how culture fit functions as a coded racial filter. These pressures extend beyond job descriptions into informal power spaces. Lunches, happy hours, hallway conversations, and social rituals where decisions are pre shaped before meetings even begin. Studies show that 70% of promotions and stretch assignments are influenced by informal networks. Yet Black employees are 25 to 40% less likely to be included in these social spaces due to cultural mismatch, exclusion, or discomfort rooted in racial hierarchy. In this environment, HR departments, supervisors, and boards increasingly function as judges and moral authorities, but not neutral ones. When over 80% of senior leadership and board members in major US companies are white, the standards used to assess professionalism, tone, and alignment inevitably reflect a dominant white paradigm. For Black professionals who are proud of their culture, the workplace becomes not just a job, but a psychological battlefield. All right? Very important topic. So, 15 structural dynamics where racial tension becomes workplace power. Promotion pipelines favor whiteness by design. Data shows that white employees are 25 to 30% more likely to be promoted than Black employees at the first managerial level. Because leadership pipelines narrow early, this gap compounds so that by senior leadership, Black representation drops below 5 to 7%, even in companies that are 15 to 20% Black at entry level. Hiring bias starts before interviews. Resume audit studies show that applicants with white sounding names receive 30 to 50% more callbacks than identical resumes with black sounding names. This bias means exclusion happens before personality, culture, or competence are ever evaluated. Professionalism is racially coded. Over 60% of black professionals report being told their communication style was too aggressive or not a culture fit, compared to less than 20% of white professionals receiving similar feedback. These judgments are rarely tied to performance metrics and often function as racialized behavioral control. Performance reviews are not race neutral. Black employees are 40% more likely to receive vague or personality based criticism. It's your tone, your attitude, or your presence, while white employees receive more actionable, skill based feedback. This directly affects promotion readiness and perceived leadership potential. Microaggressions are not micro in impact. Approximately 65 to 70% of black workers report experiencing regular microaggressions at work, compared to under 15% of white workers. These repeated stressors correlate with higher burnout, disengagement, and turnover. Happy hours decide careers. Research shows that nearly 70% of career advancing opportunities are influenced by informal social interactions. So these are your happy hours, right? Those happy hours influence your promotion, guys, by 70%. Man, I wish I would have knew this, right? Yeah, black employees are 30 to 40% less likely to attend or feel welcome in after hours social events due to cultural exclusion, family dynamics, or psychological safety concerns. Sponsorship is racially uneven. While over 60% of white professionals report having a senior sponsor advocating for them, only about 35% of black professionals report the same. Without sponsorship, promotion odds drop by nearly 50%. Tokenism increases scrutiny. Black professionals are 2 to 3 times more likely to be the only black person in a department or leadership meeting. In these environments, mistakes are remembered longer and successes are attributed less often to skill. Assertiveness is penalized differently. Studies show that black employees are 45% more likely than white employees to receive negative feedback for assertiveness, even when identical behaviors are rated positively in white colleagues. HR is not perceived as neutral. Over 55% of black employees report distrust in HR's ability to handle racial concerns fairly, compared to about 18% of white employees. This perception leads to underreporting and unresolved systemic harm. Economic inequality bleeds into workplace power. Black households hold roughly 15% of the wealth of white households on average, a disparity that shapes negotiation power, risk tolerance, and job mobility, all of which affect workplace leverage and perceived authority. Cultural expression is policed. More than 50% of black professionals report modifying their speech, modifying their hair, their dress, or demeanor at work, compared to under 10% of white professionals. This constant self monitoring creates cognitive fatigue and emotional distance. Now you add the dynamic of black fatigue in these jobs. Oh my God, I feel for you, black folks going into these workplaces, right? Who has black fatigue, who doesn't, right? Because these white folks ain't gonna tell you. When you walk up in there, they're not gonna be like, "Hey man, I'm kind of tired of getting black fatigue," because they're not gonna risk losing their job, right? So you don't know. You're probably paranoid than ever, right? So just praying for you guys, man. I know this is a really difficult, complicated psychological situation that you guys are in. Leadership trust is racially stratified. Surveys show that white employees are 35% more likely to be perceived as high potential by leadership, even when performance ratings are equal. Trust, not talent, becomes the gatekeeper. Retaliation fear silences dissent. About 48% of black employees fear retaliation, right, for raising racial concerns, compared to 17% of white employees. Silence becomes a survival strategy, not agreement, right? Decision makers reflect the dominant paradigm, right? With over 80% of executives and board members being white, organizational neutrality often masks cultural self protection. HR supervisors and boards become stabilizers of the existing hierarchy rather than challengers of inequity, right? Absolutely, black folks are going to be scared to discuss racial tensions or disparity, right? If 80% of those in power are white, you mention one incident one time, now you're worried about the whole damn building teaming up against you, right? It's like, damn, I had an instance where this girl or this guy discriminated against me, was racist, and then you're going to all white, and again, there are a couple white folks that get it. They're like, this is right, we're gonna fight for you, but then even they get ostracized because they're going against so many other white folks that are not aligned with their value system, right? They're like, oh, well, what, you're signing with this motherfucker. So it's just, and again, it's not about all or nothing, right? You got some great jobs and workplaces out there that, are really pushing for equity and diversity. I think they had a big whole DEI rollout where a lot of black women, and black folks are just getting laid off, right? And Target had to pay for it, right? They removed a lot of their DEI policies and lost all this money in sales, and now they're trying to win black people back, right? So this is an ongoing conversation. You see it in the news, but I think it's definitely important to discuss, right? Because you better believe they're discussing it in their households, all right? So black people, your family, you're welcome here to have these conversations, all right? Praying for you. I'm really praying for you because it is complicated when that stuff bleeds over into the workplace, but you got to feed your children. I gotta pay the bills. I gotta survive. But Randy, I'm in a climate where I'm constantly battling, right? I'm constantly battling. I don't know what to say. I don't know what not to say. Every day I'm praying that I got a job, right? I'm praying that they treat me right. Everything is cordial so we can have a good day. Human beings, they got feelings. They have boundary systems. They have values. So it's only right, no matter what your race. If you get disrespected, right, there's going to be a reaction, even if you keep your fucking mouth shut, right? It doesn't dismiss the reality of you being offended, right? You being disrespected, all right? So, yeah, this is. I'll come up in the future with some strategies and things that black folks can do to battle this, right? First off, have a clearly defined value system. Don't just settle for any and every job, right? Write your core values down, write your principles down. What do you stand for? Who are you? Who do you want to show up as in this world? If it's respect, if you know respect is a big ass deal for you, black folks, you might want to find a job that honors that, right? You guys are leading with the value of respect, a lot of you black folks, and then you go into a job where they're treating you like trash. What do you think is going to happen? It's only so long you can keep your mouth shut, right? I'm just going to be quiet, bite the bullet, even though my value is respect right now. I respect everybody else, Randy. I deserve to get the same back. But then you go pick a job where they don't got no respect for you, right? Stick to your value system. Don't lose hope, right? You lose hope because you think you're not going to find a job where they respect you. And there's jobs out there. I'm not saying every job I've been at, it was like, oh, let's go hang the black boy. I had a lot of great positions, a lot of great opportunities with white people. When I worked at Ford Field in Detroit, oh man, even at the interview, I just knew it was going to be a good fit. Those white folks were so cool, man. And I could just tell they were aligned with my value system because I like to be comfortable. I like to feel a sense of welcome and just, humor, just respect too. And all of that was there. And when I got the job, it was all still there. It was a wonderful. I still remember that to this day. I was all of it in high school, and I'll never forget that because it was like it showed me like not all companies that are white dominated, are looking to get rid of you guys or give you guys a hard time, right? You just got to be very intentional, right? And just do some legwork, But I get it. Sometimes you don't got the options, right? I've been in situations too where you don't got a whole lot of options. Maybe you're in a community where everything is dominated by that white, just superiority, moral authority environment. So you go left, you go right. It's all over the fucking place. So I get that. Right. So that's what I'm gonna do a video on in the future. Like how can you navigate these situations where you've done everything you can do? You've researched, you look for different jobs that fit your value system as a black American, and it's just ready everywhere I go. I'm getting nailed, So we'll talk about that. But I'm praying for you guys. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your day. And I pray that this message reaches where it needs to reach and that you feel validated and that you feel heard. You're not alone. You're not crazy. Right? We're seeing some of this stuff that's going on in these workplaces. So, just keep the faith, and you guys have a blessed day. Peace.